Welcome to the Headliners. I'm your host, Edward Mbeche, CEO and founder of Helen Technology. Today, my guest is Jason Cercone. Jason is a personal brand architect, creator, and a podcaster who helps entrepreneurs, leaders, professionals leverage the brand building power of a podcast medium to just establish authority, like increase visibility, and just accelerate the brand, their personal brand. Jason, how are you?
I'm doing great, Edward. Thanks for having me on. Looking
That's
forward to
awesome.
rapping with you today.
That's awesome. How you been? I know last time we spoke is about almost like a few weeks ago. You good?
Yeah, things have been great. Keeping things rolling. It's a good week for me because my friends are coming into town for our fantasy football weekend. So
Okay.
we golf on Friday, do some uh, wing eating and beer consumption, and then Saturday it's all about our fantasy football drafts, and
I know, right?
always a good time. It's once a year we're able to all get together and
Oh,
really enjoy ourselves. So yeah, this is
that's so
always a fun
awesome. So
week.
it's like meaning you have friends. They come from out of town. You guys get together. Is it always like on the like in you in Pittsburgh? I think, right?
Yeah, I'm in Pittsburgh. I grew up in Bradford, Pennsylvania, and I've been in Pittsburgh for 20 years now. But I've had friends that stayed in Bradford. I've had a few friends that moved to North Carolina, and our fantasy football league spans the East Coast. So we have people coming in from all corners to participate.
Okay. I was gonna ask you like one of the thing I was like my mind is going all over. I'm thinking like with that like bringing friends together. Is this always one area you guys kind of travel around? Like okay, someone live in a different city this year, this year in
No, we
Pittsburgh.
always we always convene in Pittsburgh. It's
Okay,
it's
always in
it's
Pittsburgh.
pretty much in the center for where
Okay,
people would have to travel to.
okay, okay. That's awesome. That's what I was about to ask you. The other question is like, what get you excited about life? And I was like, is this one of those things
This time of year, it's absolutely football, and then once football gets started, hockey will get me excited. I'm a big sports fan, so those types
Mhm.
of things always get me fired up. So, big Steelers fan, big Penguins fan. So, yeah, it's
I
a
mean, I
good time
mean,
of year coming up.
I mean, the Steelers sucks. Yes. So this is what this is what
Well,
get
this
excited.
year might be a little rough, so I tend to agree with you to some degree.
No, so but and before we get into kind of sport, let's do this. For someone who doesn't know who's Jason, did I pronounce the last name okay? Because sometimes I kind of mess like Sacorn,
You were close. It's Cercone.
Sacorn. So
Yes,
I added kind of like almost like a Y instead of just Sacorn.
Well, I would assume back in Italy
Hmm.
before ancestors came to America, it was probably pronounced Cercone, Cercone, something to that effect. But telemarketers have had a field day with my last name for my entire life. So I've heard every possible iteration of what my name is, probably more often than I've heard the actual pronunciation.
Yeah, Mr. Saccone, we're calling you.
Yeah, there it is.
That's awesome. So let's do this. For someone who doesn't know Jason, can we give like a background? Let's go way back. Let's touch some childhood memories, some good memories, some bad memory. Like some kid used to take your lunch when you're little, or sold some like some lemonade on the corner. Let's go back that way. Like kind of where did you grow up? Did you have a good childhood? Did you?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I grew up in Bradford, Pennsylvania. I was there for the first 22 years of my life. And yes, I always consider myself incredibly fortunate. I grew up in a great household, great family. My parents are freaking awesome, both my heroes, and really, they're the people that instilled such a strong work ethic in me.
Mhm.
They weren't entrepreneurs; they worked for companies, but they were loyal to the companies they worked for, and they worked their asses off. And I
Mhm.
saw that, and that was something that I knew I wanted to carry into my adulthood, and I couldn't ask for more. We never were in need. We weren't rich by any means, but we were never suffering. We always had a great dinner. We always had time together as family. And as I look back in time, those are the type of things that I know many people aren't fortunate enough to have, and some still don't have that in their life. So I always consider myself lucky in that respect, and those are the type of values that I hope to pass along to my daughter, because that's what's important. And as you look back in time as an older person, you really cherish those memories, and that's what I want her to understand. These are the important things in life. And as a child, that's when the entrepreneurial bug bit me, and it was by mistake or by accident. I really wasn't planning for it. At around the age of 13, I was big into sports card collecting. So I was always football cards, baseball cards, hockey cards, basketball cards, like everything. And me and my friends had a blast with it. And right down the street from my house was a gentleman who had a card shop in his basement. So I'd be down there on a weekly basis with my allowance, spending what I could and making trades, and ended up developing a pretty good friendship with the guy. He's a super nice guy. And we always were talking about what do you do next with your collection? What are you supposed to do with these assets? And many people it was all about the collecting, but him as a businessman, he was about selling these assets. And he would always go to card shows, and he would set up a booth or a table or a series of tables and have his products out. And then people would congregate at these events and do trading, purchase, all kinds of great things. And I was always at those shows. And one day he asked me if I'd be willing to set up my own table. He had a partner that he worked with who needed some assistance, and they said, we'll sell you a table at a discount, and you can set up your cards and you can sell them to the public, do whatever you want with them. But in exchange, we just need an extra person here to help out. And I thought the opportunity was phenomenal. I said, absolutely, I would love to do that. And that got the ball rolling. In my very first card show, I made a profit and realized how exciting it was to have my own little enterprise. I wasn't thinking long term about, okay, I should take this money and invest it, because I just took that money and bought more cards. But I learned a lot about inventory management. I learned a lot about negotiating at a very young age, and learned a lot about sales as well. And these are all skills that I've been able to cultivate over my lifespan, but I utilize them every day in what I do now. So looking back on childhood, I have a lot of fond memories.
That's so awesome. Like with this, like, so from there, did you end up like kind of also selling like cards on like eBays and kind of all this? So it's like in a way you didn't grow up like selling lemonade, but because you already had this thing already making you money.
Exactly. No, I mean, I never went the eBay route. I'll tell you, eBay depressed the hell out of me as I got older, because there were a lot of cards that I held on to. And as I got a little bit older, because that run only lasted about 2 or 3 years, and then I was old enough to drive and get a job, and me and my friends were constantly playing basketball and football. We were just always on the move, and sports card collecting took a back seat. And then eventually it was just, I had these boxes in my closet that just gathered dust. And later on in life, I started thinking about it again. So I pulled everything out and I started organizing, and I'm thinking about, and even to this day, I still have these like pangs inside of me that want to get back into collecting and get back into doing this in a virtual environment, and maybe even open a little virtual card shop to where I could sell things online, but haven't made that move yet. There just aren't enough hours in the day. But I used eBay to see what these cards were selling for. And I'm talking about really nice cards that I had that were worth at least 3 digits when I was a kid. And that was why I held on to them. They're selling for like $13, $14 on eBay. That was so depressing, because I'm like, I could have sold these and had a small mint when I was a kid. But in my mind, I was looking at how my father's card collection had appreciated in value over time.
Oh, and your father also had some cards.
My uncle and my father collected as well. Now the caveat with their card collection was they didn't take care of it. They flipped the cards literally, like they played a game where you'd flip them and you'd call heads or tails, and it would damage the product. They weren't thinking on this level of, well, this is a collectible that if it's in mint condition, it's worth a ton of money. And so some of the cards I had were in good condition. My uncle was more cognizant of these collectibles, and he wanted to take good care of them. So his card collection was in much better shape than my dad's. But I thought about all these cards they had, and I thought, well, these could appreciate in value over time, and my cards are worth a lot now. Think of what they'll be worth in 10 or 15 years. But I was collecting at a time when the market was flooded. So there wasn't a lot of rarity. So the cards, there's just so much product out there that the demand and the price just it went right along with it. So I figured, well, when I started assessing what I had, I'm like, I'm going to wait a little bit longer. Maybe I can catch this on the peak
Yeah.
because right now everything seems to be on the valley. So everything's still in the closet collecting dust. We'll see what happens in the future.
I guess, like in life, there's always like like every new generation always they always kind of either find something to kind of pick it up from there, kind of increase something or mess it up. So, like, let's say, like your dad's generation was to collect cards for fun, and then now our generation, and you were like, you know what, we can sell this.
Yeah, no,
So,
it's so funny. This past weekend, we were all together for my niece's baptism, and we were sitting around talking and about a lot of these old collectibles. And I don't know if you remember, Edward, there was this product called Starting Lineup. It was sports
I heard of
action
it.
figures,
Mhm.
and I had probably at least a dozen from the very first year they ever came out. And that was when I was probably 6 or 7 years old. So my mind was not to leave these things in the package. My mind was to get out and play with them and
Play with it. Yep.
reenact scenarios and all these fun things. So I had all of these action figures that I played with. And then when I got into the collectible phase, I would go to these booths and see people have these exact same action figures. I'll never forget Dan Marino's, which I had. Somebody was selling it for $600. Michael Jordan, somebody was selling it for $800. I also had that. And I'm looking, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I had these two little figures in they're just in my toy box right now. They're worth,
Like
I could be selling them and getting $1,500. That's a lot of money as a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, they were probably worth $5 out of the
Yeah.
package, but it is what it is.
Do you have anything like you think now in your collection? Do you have anything has like really good value on those cards?
I look at it as it's in the eye of the beholder. You know, there might not be a lot of monetary value on it now, but if you find the right collector, I think they would probably be willing to pay more of a premium if it's something that they really want.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have a few cards in my collection that I think they would reflect that. But for me, it's I want to figure again. This could be one of those passion projects that I attack when I'm in retirement to figure out
Yeah.
what I really want to do with this asset.
Yeah.
And maybe by then there is a little bit more value behind it. We'll see. But I'm in no hurry to do anything with what I have.
Let's talk about sales. You mentioned that you discovered sales and negotiation at the young age.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this is one of the very important lesson maybe should be taught at the young age also because you can use in real life instead of
Oh, sure. I mean, I think people that can find that skill set, to me, it's not just about the ability to sell, it's about the ability to listen.
Mhm.
I think, and that's where a lot of what I do in the podcasting space, whether it's from hosting my own show or helping others build their personal brand through this platform,
Mhm.
it's all about listening because the most compelling content comes from good conversation and listening to the person on the other side of the table or the other side of the microphone. And when you can actively listen to what they're saying instead of trying to prepare what you want to say next, good organic conversation can break out. It's a lot more compelling and it gives the audience something that they can latch onto. In my opinion, sales operates the exact same way because you have to be thinking like your customer. And there's always been this stereotype of sales people are sleazy and they're always out for their own gain. And I think to some degree, there's probably some element of that still in existence. But for the most part, salespeople that succeed today listen to what their customers need and
Yeah.
they meet them at that critical point to where they're ready to move forward. They're ready for this transformation in their life and they've listened to all of their needs so they can give them a product that allows them to feel that transformation.
Mhm.
And people will appreciate you much more if you're willing to listen. If you're not making it all about you, but you're making it about them. And the ability to do that at a young age is something that I've carried through my entire life. And I don't mean to sound braggy in any respect, but I've always felt like customer service came natural to me because I was always willing to put myself in the customer's shoes. And I realized that it was not about me and I didn't have to win some argument. I just had to give a person what they need and give them an ear that they could talk into. And that would allow me to cultivate something that
Yeah.
would help them grow. to me, that's what sales is all about. I think you can get much further in life if you think on that level, or much further in business, I should say, in regards to sales, if you think on that level versus just coming into every possible scenario with this transactional mindset that you have to close. I have to close this. It's not always about that.
Yeah, that's a mentality of a car salesperson.
Yeah, and I get it. I mean, it's
All about
something.
numbers.
It's a principle that's beaten into a lot of salespeople from the very top, from the very beginning of when their career starts. And I've worked in those high pressure sales environments, and it really wasn't for me. For me, I would rather be able to build relationships. And I remember I worked in car sales with like legit at a dealership car sales for I lasted 3 months. What you want to talk about? I mean, that was square peg round hole. I couldn't do it. And then when I was finally starting to get comfortable, I was doing it my way to a degree, but I was spending more time building that relationship, and the sales manager hated it. You got to close them. I was like, that's it. When he told me I was doing it wrong, I was like, this is never going to work for me. I think I quit the next day. I really did. I mean, it was just, that's just not the type of environment that I'm comfortable selling in. I'm never going to feel happy with trying to underhand somebody and put them into something that with a car, it's a long-term investment.
Yeah.
If they're not happy right from the start, what kind of taste does that leave in their mouth for you?
Exactly.
It's brutal.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I know you do. I think with this experience, with also the way or the value that you have, um, and from that experience that you have within you, actually it kind of transformed to what you do now, like helping startup and leaders, like building their personal brand. But before we get there, I want to go a little bit also kind of like back a little bit from your experience. Like let's pick it up from when was your first job? Like when you're like, okay, I'm not talking about as your kid. I'm talking about now. Okay, I'm 21. This is my first. Now I'm in the world. I'm in the real world. What was your
Yeah.
first job?
It was, I mean, I'll tell you, Edward, it was not a straight path. I did not arrive here in linear fashion. There was a lot of, I mean, I ended up working in areas that, as a 21-year-old, I never thought I'd be. And when I was 21, my big passion was radio. It's ironic how it all came full circle when podcasting really became a big part of my life. But I majored in communications at college at Pitt Bradford, where I went to school, had a radio show, absolutely loved it, and had a mindset that I was going to look at radio for a career, and realized that I mean, it didn't come together fast enough. I ended up lightly pursuing it, and for whatever reason, I could kick myself when I look back on this. Instead of going full bore and really putting my focus on it, cell phones were the big rage at this point in my life. So early 2000s, things were really, I mean, you think about now, it's just such a thing in our life. We don't even think about it anymore. But back then, some people didn't even have a cell phone. And it was, in my mind, I'm like, ooh, this is a emerging market. I could be a part of this in my little.
You're talking about BlackBerry age.
Even before Blackberries. I think even Blackberries were a little primitive at that point in time.
Yeah.
So we're talking like the most basic flip phone looked like the greatest invention that we've ever had.
Yeah.
And I got into selling cell phones for a small company in Bradford right out of college, and that didn't. And I realized quick, I'm like, this didn't work. But at that point, radio had pretty much left me, and I ended up moving to Pittsburgh because I pursued my master's degree out at Duquesne University here in Pittsburgh. So I left Bradford, moved here, took a door-to-door job, which was, I mean, I will say, I did it for 3 months, and it was in a bad 3 months because it was when winter was setting in. So you're going door-to-door in the wintertime. Not always fun, but started in the fall where weather was still good. And I will say, I mean, I look back, I try to, everything I've done, I try to gain some kind of experience, some kind of positive from it, and say, this was an experience that I can learn from if I'm willing to dig deep into what it actually was. With that job, I learned how to start conversations in an instant, because you knock on somebody's door, and granted, it's different today. I don't even know if people would answer the door now. I would not want to be a door-to-door salesman in 2022. But in 2003, when someone answers the door, you only have a few seconds to break the ice and get them on your side. So I learned that skill of starting a conversation and breaking the ice and making them comfortable. So I would just always say some random things when I knocked on the door, just to again to get a laugh out of them, so I could start to establish that trust, and then they maybe listen to me. And not everybody bought from me, but I was at least able to have some semblance of a conversation without having a door slammed in my face. So I'd knock on the door and I'd say, "Hey, I hear your internet's out. I'm here to fix it."
Mhm.
Like, "Oh, my internet's working." I'm like, "I'm sorry, I got the wrong house," or something. Like, again, just something to get them on my side. It was always random, stupid stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, I even say, things like, if they didn't have a pool, I could look out back and say, "Hey, I'm here to fix your pool," and it would just, "We don't have a pool." I'm like, "Why don't you have a?" Again, random, stupid, but again, it got them talking.
Yeah.
And then I could easily transition from, well, if you don't have a poll, let's talk about, here's my product. You know what I mean? Like, there are ways to do it. And I learned that skill set. And I've talked to other podcasters. They've asked this question, what's your superpower? And the answer I always give is my ability to converse with anybody. I will have a conversation with anyone, anytime, anywhere. Just sit us down together and let's talk.
Yeah.
And I take that ability into podcasting as well, because my mind is to always go deep with everyone I'm talking to. You're probably used to this, Edward. In any scenario, you're probably in a position where you're getting a lot of surface level questions. It's the basic, "Oh, how about this weather today?" And, "Oh, tell me about your podcast." Like, okay, okay, you have these entities, but let's really dig into what you're doing and what makes you passionate about it.
Mhm.
If I were to sit down with you for the first time, Edward, I would ask you, you've got a live, you do a live stream on LinkedIn and you have a podcast. That's awesome. Why are you so passionate about that? What excites you to have these conversations? See, that gives you an opportunity to open up a little bit. So that was a skill set that I picked up at that job. And we can keep going down this road if you want. I mean, it's
I'm telling you, like, people maybe, and I completely understand. Some people might not understand it. It's a real skill to just have a conversation, be able to pick it up a conversation with anyone. And because sometimes it can be really awkward talking to people, but for people that find it like just easy to pick up any kind of conversation, kind of, I don't know. I don't know if I want to say you can use that conversation skill to get out of anything, but
yes and no.
So, but yeah, you reminded me of like when you say cell phone. I was remembering about. I don't know if you remember those Nextel. They used to have like it's like a chopper. Like you press it, and then you let it go. I missed that.
I swear that was what got me excited about cell phones. Me and my friends thought those were the coolest. We never could get them. And then I finally when I started working at Enterprise, they brought Nextels into the world. I'm trying to remember if they were part of the rental experience, but I worked for a company, or a part of the company, later on before I left, where we would sell cars to the dealerships. They were all the old rental cars. Our job was to manage this inventory and take it to dealerships to have them sell it on their used car lot. And Nextels were part of our life every day. And I remember finally getting to use that technology going, this really sucks.
Yeah.
This is not that good. What were we so excited about? It's just a walkie-talkie.
But with the long range, though, it had a long range, so that was
I guess.
I would love to have it back instead of. I guess that was our way of communicating. Like right now, if I want to talk to you, I just text you. So instead of texting you, I can just be like, "Hey, Jason, you good? Where are you?" Kind of instead of.
Yeah. I think you can do, and I mean, now a lot of it is voice text. I think that's a big part of communication through. I mean, I love the voice text.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would take the chopper thing back. I would be like, I would take that in a heartbeat instead of text, unless they also convert the whole thing voice to text. But I would take that, be like, hey, you hear me? Like, I don't know, like maybe just me. So let's talk about before we jump into how you help founders and CEO and leaders into this personal brand. You created this thing was called Breaking News.
Breaking Brews.
Breaking brews. You know,
Yes.
breaking news.
Yes.
Breaking brews. What is that? What was that?
Breaking brews was, I'll tell you, that was a very fun part of my life in regards to working and in regards to a career.
Mhm.
I have always, I mean, if you're looking at my LinkedIn profile, I obviously didn't list everything.
Yeah.
There was a lot of opportunities that I tried to launch and they really didn't take off. I got into an online travel business. I got into a weight loss thing. I got into, I did a sports blog and a sports website. I did a social media company. And these are just things that, for me, I don't, they're all learning experiences. I learned things along the way. Some of them would generate some income, but they just really never were to a point where I could see keeping it going. And I remember I was sitting at a bar before a Pittsburgh Pirates game, and the girl I was dating at the time hadn't arrived yet. She was meeting me there.
Mhm.
And I was just sitting there having a beer and minding my own business. And it was a bar right across the street from the stadium, and it always fills up before the game. Like everybody came to this bar for a beer. It was always fun. And I was sitting there just watching TV, and it was a craft beer bar. They had a lot of good artisanal beer. Even, I mean, that was at the probably at the early stages of what this craft beer boom that we're living in today.
Mhm.
They had a lot of good options, and this guy came up to the bar, stood right next to me, and said to the bartender, "I want a Miller Lite." I said, "We don't have Miller Lite here." "What?" And he said, "Oh, okay, I'll have a Bud Light." She goes, "Okay, we don't serve Bud Light either." He's like, "What are you talking about?" Blah, 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 blah. And he finally goes, "Well, what can you give me that's comparable?" And he didn't want to hear any of the craft beer options. And she said, "What about a Yingling?" He goes, "Fine, a Yingling, a Yingling." So when this girl went to go get his beer, he just turned and looked at me and said, "How in the hell does this place think it's going to survive without Miller Lite and Bud Light?" And I just looked at him. I said, "Dude, look around you. This place is packed. I think they're going to be okay."
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't like my answer, and he turned away from me, and he got his Yingling, and he went back to his group. And after he left, I started thinking that, I'm sitting in a craft beer bar. These purveyors are trying to get this product over with their audience, and there's people like that guy that just don't understand it. They just don't know what this product is all about and how it in many ways would compare to the beer they've been drinking for years, but in more ways is better. They just have to open their mind a little bit. So I thought maybe I can put a voice out there that's all about advocacy, that's all about education, helping people understand this product. So I launched Breaking Brews. And that name had a two-pronged effect. That was at the height of Breaking Bad. I was huge and still into that. So I was like, okay, I can get breaking into it that way. And then brews rhymes with news. So you get like the breaking news effect, but it's all about beer.
Yeah.
And it caught on very, very well. I put out some posts that went viral. I connected with some bars and breweries around the Pittsburgh area and didn't charge anything. Just said, "Listen, I'd like to cover what you're doing. I need some content. If you want some additional exposure, I'd be happy to work with you." And I was able to start building some great relationships in the space by doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until probably a year in where I really, truly monetized it, where I launched an app that connected beer drinkers to all the events and happenings and things going down at their favorite venues. And I had several partners in that, and it was a very fun time. And that morphed into starting a beer podcast. I also started doing sales and marketing and product placement for some of the breweries in Pittsburgh. And I pretty much did that through the middle of the pandemic. So Breaking Brews was a lot of fun. When I started it, I was very excited. And it was one of those things because I always say, "Is this something you can do long term?" And at that point, the answer was like, "Yeah, I'm never going to get tired of beer." Not factoring in that I was eventually going to turn 40.
Did you like
It's not that I ever got tired of beer, but it just wasn't this priority, like going out and going to the bar and doing all these things that I used to do at a young age.
Yeah.
I was growing up, I was maturing, I was getting into other things. And the one thing that sparked in all of that really stuck, that I am confident in saying I know will never go away, is podcasting.
Yeah.
Because it rekindled the passion for audio that I had when I was in radio in college.
Yeah.
And that has carried me forward since 2015, and here we are.
I guess it's part of what the podcast is like, because you getting introduced to either new guests, new material, new different, like, so it's something new every day. So that kind of keep you going. But talking about like getting older, It's like, yeah, probably like when you were younger, you're like, yeah, you go Monday to get some beer, Tuesday, like, yeah, when you get
Hmm.
some friend. And then as you get older, you be like, man, I was just there yesterday. I don't want to go today. Like
Yeah,
your
well,
body just kind of be like, hey, like, and also just some other responsibility and stuff, right?
I rarely drink anymore. I do every now and again. I mean,
Yeah,
and for me, it's a social experience. I very rarely, if ever, will sit at the house by myself and drink.
yeah,
I've done that in the past, even in the past, for me, it's always been about the social aspect. I'm going to go out and meet my friends and have a few beers. I'm going to go to this brewery and check out what they're doing. But while I'm there, I'm going to converse with others and get a feel for what they're experiencing.
yeah, yeah.
And again, that social element was always and still is what makes me passionate about it.
Mhm.
And as I got older, like you said it perfect, Edward, you just start to realize that there are other responsibilities in your life. For
Yeah.
me at this age, I know if I tie one on, I lose the next day. I don't recover and bounce back like I used to. And
Yeah,
I think I share that same feeling with a lot of people. So I don't want to
exactly.
put myself in that
Yeah,
situation. So
yeah,
instead of really going crazy, I would rather just sit, have a good conversation, maybe sip a few beverages, and I can wake up the next day and still be productive. Because at this point in my life, that's what's important.
you
It's
know,
not about the party. It's about how
yeah,
can I be productive and make an impact the next day while
yeah,
still enjoying myself and relaxing. So
yeah.
for me, it's just have a couple and move on.
So
And I've
this,
gotten big into cigars too. So that's
yeah,
an easy one. I love to smoke a good cigar with a glass of
yeah.
bourbon. So
Yeah, I have one of my friends. He gets some really good cigars. Um, but so with this, I was just thinking about like you mentioned about like I remember last time I went out. It was like I started at right like maybe 5:30 p.m. and stay until like 11 p.m. something like that. The next morning is like I got up like I like to take a shower early. As soon as I wake up in the morning, I take a shower. So I got up, took a shower, had my coffee, and I was like, no, today is gonna be one of those days. I just lounged in the couch for like I think until like 2 p.m. just kind of lounging, just
yeah.
trying to recover from yesterday.
I part of me, I mean, I know that like if I'm gonna do that, I should be
Mhm.
planning for it, but I just
Yeah,
to me, it's just not worth it. I would
yeah,
I mean, again, it's not to say that I might not get carried away sometime, but again, I just know that I'm gonna have to soldier through the next day. And I'd
but
rather be with more of a clear headspace, clear mindset. And
but
it is
that's
what
the
it is.
thing though. That's the thing about adjusting is like probably it's very important to get through all this stuff when you're young.
Oh,
And I think
sure.
you have seen where some older people now who never had those funds now
Mhm.
they're trying to get like, oh, it's so fun, but it's like,
Yeah.
what are you
Or they
doing?
never grew up and they can just keep the party going.
Exactly. So let's switch gear a little bit. So from there, how did you end up with this Cercone consulting, helping like person brand as a person brand architect? Maybe you can
Yeah.
let's come explain how you got into it and what is this person brand architect?
Absolutely. So, I mean, to give you an idea of how this all came together, my podcasting journey started in 2015 when I started my first show.
Mhm.
And me and my best friend, we took it as far as we could take it. And then I started my own show.
This
And
this was you're talking about the brand the Breaking Brews.
no, this is how the podcasting
Okay,
started, and
okay.
this led me into what I'm doing today.
Mhm.
When I got into the second podcast, I discovered that I was really enjoying podcasting, but I needed to develop a skill set and I needed to learn more about what this medium was all about. So I canceled that show, took every episode down, and just stopped podcasting for a year and a half and start.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Before you go, actually, I meant to mention something like the way you were talking about you. When someone look on your LinkedIn, there's some stuff that you did not plug in because you're starting, you're closing, you're starting, you're closing.
Mhm,
But in terms of from the beginning, so this is like whatever is called an entrepreneur, right?
mhm,
Someone who has an entrepreneur spirit, someone who's always their brain is always kind of just rolling like maybe if I do this idea, then you find out no, it's not good. It's not
mhm.
like you failed because you tried it and you're
Exactly.
trying to find the right thing to be like, is this the right thing? No, you throw it up and start another one. And it's
Mhm.
the same as someone maybe they get from one job to another job because they are looking for that good match, right? There
Exactly.
are some people who are like, oh, I would just stay at this job. It's miserable. I am. I can just wait for my paycheck every 2 weeks or every week or whatever. But
Mhm.
for entrepreneurs, like there's always something until you find exactly what you're looking for. It matches, like you enjoy doing it,
Yep.
but also you're really helping people. Yeah, sorry. Let's go
Oh no,
ahead.
you're exactly right. Like Thomas Edison said, I've never failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that didn't work.
Yeah,
And that's how I've always looked at it. And again,
exactly.
I mean, I've always also believed that through life, your purpose will never change, but your passions might.
Yeah,
And when your passions change, like I know personally, when that happens, I feel it in my gut. I know it's time to pivot and make those moves. And I've been able to do so. And to get back on track with the podcast, the podcasting started when I did a beer podcast,
mhm,
started a second beer podcast, and stopped that. And that's when I took time to learn. I wanted to know more about the podcasting platform as a whole. So in addition to that, I listened to podcasts. I was listening more analytically. I was listening to how these podcasters were producing content. How were they talking to their guests? How were they putting shows out that people were really grabbing hold of? In addition to that, I was listening to radio personalities. I was watching newscasters. And again, not for the news, but from that analytical standpoint of how are they delivering this message? What is their tempo? How do they communicate with the guest that's on the other side of the table? These are all very important elements and factors for me because I knew I could adopt all of this and cultivate my skill set on the back of what others have been doing to gravitate or have people gravitate to them. So when I did decide to jump back into podcasting, it was much more successful because I had gained a better understanding of how to conduct myself and how to build content. And
But
that's not this.
also,
Go
but
ahead.
also, I was about to mention this is like a full circle.
Yeah.
Remember, you have this communication background,
Hmm.
but you end up leaving it because maybe it was so intense in a way. You gotta be like this, gotta be like this. So now with podcasting, it's a little bit better because
Hmm.
it's more laid back and you're able to control everything. Kind of.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, I mean you're absolutely right. I mean, I knew I had talked to people in radio. I had, like I said, lightly pursued potentially going down that path for a career. And the feedback I got really wasn't great. I think that, as I look back on it, I think maybe if I would have had a little bit more passion for it, it's one of those things to where you start early and you take your lumps, but you gain experience that allows you to elevate to the next level and then the next level and beyond. And I more than likely, not being able to completely recall this point in my life, fell into that trap to where I want to be on top now. And a lot of people still fall into that trap. And now, as an older man, I can say that doesn't work. It's so hard to start on top because even if something were to elevate you to the top from the very start, if you were to be in that really odd, lucky scenario where that happened, what the hell do you do when you're there? Can you hang? Because if you can't, you're going to get exposed really quickly. So it's better
Yeah,
to start at the bottom and get experience and
yeah,
work your way up. And while you're working your way up, have some fun doing it. Embrace the process and really get something from it. And that was really where things started to go with me.
mhm,
And it was in during the pandemic where to tell you how this really happened. Coming into 2020,
mhm.
my birthday is right at the end of the year. So naturally, I would be doing an evaluation of things going into the new year anyway. Going into 2020, I just turned 40 on December 29th, and I sat down and looked at myself and looked at everything that happened. It had been a good year. 2019 had been a good year. 2020 was looking like it was going to be incredibly promising. You know where this is going.
Yeah, yeah,
I said to myself, okay, things are going well. You've obviously got some attention. You're building a good brand. You've got people that trust you. The relationships are going really well. But can you do this long term into your 60s? That was the question I asked myself. Because as a 40-year-old person or a 40-year-old man, I started thinking about this long term thing. And the answer emphatically in my head was no. And I said, okay, if that's the answer, what's the path? So I had cultivated this path of business success that contained podcasting, but it also had these other elements that I didn't know if I'd be able to keep up with. But starting off 2020, everything looked good. The first quarter of 2020, most profitable quarter I ever had as a business. And then March of 2020 hits, and now we're in a worldwide pandemic. And I looked, I'm like, of course we are. Why wouldn't we be? Things were right on track. Why wouldn't the world come to an end?
Yeah.
So I said, all right, well, maybe this is a chance to reevaluate. And since the universe is forcing my hand, maybe I need to go a different direction. And in that time frame, I had also had a friend who came to me and said, I love what you're doing with podcasting. Can you help me launch a show? Tell me what I need to know. I need to pick your brain. I said, I'd be happy to. So we got on a phone call and he asked him, so he's like, tell me what's in it. Like, what I need to know? What do I need to do? And I just started rattling off everything that you need to do to start a podcast.
Yep.
And in that, I realized as I was talking in my head, I'm like, you're scaring him. He might not want to do a podcast after this because I'm not going to sugarcoat anything because I wouldn't want him to get a few episodes in and be like, you never told me this.
Yeah.
I wanted to understand everything. And when I got done, there was this little 5-second awkward pause. And he just said, son of a bitch, that's a lot more than I thought. And while I was talking, it also dawned on me that I could help him with this. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, listen, yes, it absolutely is. And that's why I would recommend partnering. Let's you and I work together. Yep. And I'll help you cultivate the content. Then I can edit it and put together a solid production that we put out to the world. You love the idea. We ran with it. And that's really where it all started. And immediately in my head, I was like, I can do this for others too. That's how things started rolling. And then in the midst of all of that, I started looking at the guest side of podcasting, just from all this communication I was having with guests for my show and for shows that I was producing for my client.
Yeah.
I was learning a lot about how important that role is. And that's when I decided to go all in on let's use this platform to build your personal brand, because you can tell such amazing stories through the podcast platform if you understand how to leverage it to your advantage. Don't go into sales mode. Be compelling. Give the audience something they can grab hold of. And that's going to make them realize that you really are a resource they can trust.
Yeah.
And a lot of that cold calling that you have to do can be eliminated, because if they hear you on a podcast, they've already established some level of trust. That really stuck out to me. And that's why I decided I want to pursue this, and I want to help as many people as possible understand how they can do this for their brand. And that brings us to today.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So with this, so you come in, you help someone, so you're creating like almost like a strategic plan for them, or you call an AgTech system for them to follow. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like almost, it's like a blueprint almost, you said, like do this.
Yep.
But is it, and I completely understand, because I have watched some people, like you will watch a video, just people just mumbling all over the place. And you're like, what are you doing? Like, I don't understand. Just because you heard video helps to get you out there, it doesn't mean now you just got to spam people with a bunch of junks out there. So it's like they're gonna tune you off kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So does everyone who's either a CEO and a founder of a company, or like a leader in their industry, or with this different knowledge, whatever, does everyone has to have this personal brand of with the podcast kind of thing? Or do you suggest like it has to be like, yeah, you have to have this? Or like, is everybody just be like, oh yeah, because I'm the leader in this industry, or I'm a car salesperson now, I can start my own podcast, kind of, how to sell cars, or how not to sell a car, maybe, I don't know.
Honestly, I mean, I would advise not starting with a podcast. Start by being a guest. Mm-hmm. That's really, I mean, there's so many reasons for that. And one of the biggest reasons is getting into podcasting. Yes, the barriers to entry are pretty minimal, but it's a time commitment. You have to be willing to put in, I mean, at a minimum, a year to really see traction be gained. And you have to be, and that's, and in that commitment is consistency. You have to be delivering every week. Now, if you can do that, awesome. Start a podcast. But if you're fresh to this, you want to take your personal brand to new levels. You want to get your message out there. You want to find your voice. be a guest, connect with other podcasters, because in that, you're going to cultivate your voice. You're going to bring your story to life. You're going to get more confident in telling it. You're going to find new dynamic ways to tell it. And you're networking every single time you make a guest appearance, at least if you do it right. If you show up in sales mode, you're going to crush your opportunity to network. But you could connect with another podcaster and help them create content that they can then put out to their audience, and that's going to help them grow. That's what podcasters want. If podcasters can put a piece of content in front of their audience that they love, that this was awesome, they're going to turn around and recommend that content to someone in their circle. That's how you grow your audience. So they're going to be thankful that you showed up and helped them grow to the point that they may sell for, they're going to sell for you. If you do a great job, they're going to tell their audience, go pick up Edward's book, go get his course, go do what he's telling you to do because he is awesome.
Yeah.
In addition, when the mic goes off, that's one of my favorite times in the podcast experience. Before the mic goes on and when the mic goes off, which you might think is not that important, right? Because it's all about the interview.
Mhm.
The interview is incredibly important, but that beginning time and that end time, that's the green room. That's where you're getting to know each other. That's where you're building chemistry and building this relationship. When the interview ends, the podcaster may say, that was great. I have 5 friends that would love to have you on their podcast too. Can I connect you? What are you going to say? No, of course not. They may say, I work with a few people who could use your service. I'm going to connect you with them. Would that be okay? Absolutely. Connect me with them. That's the whole idea of this process. It's not just about having interviews. It's about how you can leverage this platform as a networking tool that allows you to connect with new people and open up the door to new opportunities. When you do that, sky's the limit.
Yeah.
And that's how you truly leverage this platform, and your personal brand is going to skyrocket because people see you as a trusted resource and they're going to want to be in business with you.
That's awesome. So with this brand architect, so whenever you so saying, okay, instead of you like let's say you're the CEO, the founder of company, instead of you starting with the podcast first, start with the interviews where you're building your brand slowly, building your voice. So when you giving them that blueprint, are you also helping them to place them into different podcasts? Are you telling them, hey, get booked here, or things like that?
Yeah, I mean, and that's really the extension. What it starts with my guest accelerator program. If someone really wants to understand how they can make podcast guesting work, we go through my guest accelerator program, which operates on 2 levels. I have a few hours of training videos that people can access, and that's step 1. If they want to go all in, we do an intensive training, we do practice interviews, we really dig in to cultivating and building this blueprint that's going to allow them to make guest appearances that stick, that resonate. In order to do that, you also have to find podcasts that align with your brand objectives.
Yeah.
There are platforms out there that will allow you to do this yourself, or you can do it DIY. And some people choose to do it on their own, but others will hire somebody like me who will then handle the outreach process.
Yeah.
I like to think I have a unique perspective that I can give people because I'm also a podcaster. So I know what I'm looking for when a guest comes to me and says, I want to be on your show. If someone gives me a list of accolades, I congratulate them, but that doesn't tell me what they're going to bring to the podcast. I need to know how you're going to impact my audience, and I need to know what you're going to say to make that happen. If you can show that in your presentation, then I'm more prone to respond with a positive and say, yes, let's move forward. Let's get you booked and let's start the process. But some people just lean on this. I'm a 7-figure earner and I'm a 3X award winner and I have celebrities over to my house for dinner a few days a week. And that's all great. Again, if you've reached that level in your life, I find I nothing but respect and admiration for what you've accomplished. But that's only going to get you so far as a podcast guest. We need to dig into your brand story. How did you make all that stuff happen? What tactical strategies did you implement that you can now come on my podcast, have a great conversation with me about, and impact my audience because they're here for it. They want to do what you've done. They can look at your list all day long, but if they don't know how to get to that level and you're not giving them the tools to do it, why would they listen? So I can teach someone as they reach out to podcasts, whether they're having me handle the communication or they're doing it on themselves or they're using a service. This is what podcasters are going to be looking for. And you have to find shows that are in your wheelhouse, that are in your space. Because if you work in marketing and you go on a fantasy football podcast, your message isn't going to resonate because listeners come to that podcast for fantasy football advice.
Yeah.
You need to find marketing podcasts. You need to find entrepreneurial podcasts. And most importantly, you need to find podcasts where your targeted audience are tuning in. That's the process. And that's where a lot of people fall short because they will spray and pray, throw their list of accolades at 100,000 different podcasts, hoping a few respond saying, yeah, I'll bring you on. But if it's not your target audience, who cares? Because it won't get you anything after all the effort you put into it. This is the science and the art that I teach, in addition to having the fundamental skills to carry on a great conversation that allows you to thrive in this environment.
Yeah. And actually, like, if you told me this, like maybe not even that long, if you told me this about maybe like 5-7 years ago, I'd be like, I don't care. But now I see how much the value of this, like what you're saying, from just me being a founder of a startup, when the investor want to do, like, they want to do due diligence, right? Even like, let's say you work for like an industry and you have this knowledge about an industry. Like sometime, like for me as a startup investor, end up Googling my name just trying to see something. So like imagine if they Google your name as a startup founder and they see a bunch of links that listing for you. That's a really good boost. That's really good for investor. And also for employees, I mean, employers who like, you go apply for a company somewhere, they also do, like, they look at your resume, but sometimes they Google your name to just see some. Imagine if they Google and they see all this, they're like, yo, this guy is an influencer, has done all this interview, have done all this. That's actually really good on your, and even probably an employer can think twice, like, hey, we were gonna give him this salary, but after looking at, he just do the due diligence, see all this stuff he has done, maybe we need to adjust the income a little bit. That's where my head is going as for employee relationship.
You're 100% right.
Yep.
These podcast interviews serve as tremendous credibility boosters.
Yeah.
The more people have this social proof that you truly are an expert in your field, the more they can trust you.
Yeah.
The more they trust you, the more they're going to want to take the next step and be a part of your world. And it's all about delivering value. And there's a model of consistency that needs to be followed with the guest appearances you make, because the more you're talking about the same message, you're boosting the importance of that message, while at the same time building that credibility and growing that know, like, and trust factor amongst you and your audience. And when you have that type of environment established to where people, again, like I said before, when you're in that initial sales process, if somebody finds your website and they're searching for whatever they're searching for, they find you. When they call, there's that initial feeling out process on both sides. On your side, as the business owner, you have to determine if this is the right customer for you. And from the customer side, you have to determine if this is an entity or a business or a brand that you want to invest in, and trust them to give them the transformation they seek, or that you seek, I should say, sorry. And when people hear you on a podcast, you knock probably 3/4 of that initial cold outreach process out of the park. Everybody already knows who you are, what you do, where you want to take people, and how you're going to get them there. That's really what it's all about. So if you can simplify your sales process and give people more opportunities to learn about, again, who you are, what you do, where you want to take people, and how you want to take them there, you could accomplish so much and save yourself a lot of time. But it's all about how you cultivate this message and put it out into the world.
Jason Cercone,
I'll take both.
Mr. Brand Architect himself. So let's say you build this for like this roadmap for someone to follow, like do some interview first before you start your own podcast. How many, or what is your suggestion? Do you do like, hey, do at least 10 interview podcasts to see if you enjoy it? And also from there, like find your voice. Is it like a number of how many podcasts at least you should do to just kind of fill in news, you know?
It's hard to assign a number to it because everybody's different. Everybody's going to get comfortable at their own pace and their own speed. So I at a minimum, I would say try to do at least one guest appearance a week. It doesn't have to be, I mean, that again, that's a minimum. I've had months where I've done 3 interviews. I've had months where I've done 25. And it really just comes down to what you're comfortable with and how it fits into your schedule, because you don't want to overwhelm yourself to the point where this doesn't become fun. Because at the core of this is an incredibly fun way to build your brand, because you're getting these awesome opportunities to connect with like-minded individuals and talk about your passions. Can you think of anything more fun than that? I can't.
Yep.
And as you do that, your brand grows. Everything starts to matriculate down the road, and things start to click and fall into place. The more you do it, the better you get, because you're putting in those practice swings. You're just getting better at your craft. And it's more little pieces of content that are out on the World Wide Web for people to find you and gravitate to you. So you have to, this is something that we would cover incredibly early if you were working with me. Why do you want to do this? What are you looking to accomplish? We have to establish your why. And then we have to determine what kind of commitment you can make to it. And again, trying to do an interview once a month or every few months or a couple a quarter will not let you flex those muscles and put in the practice swings. So you have to get consistent with it. As you get better, as you get more confident, you can up the amount of interviews you work into your schedule. But you never want to put yourself in a spot where you look at your schedule for the day and say, man, I got to do a podcast interview today. I just did one yesterday. Because if you come into it with that attitude, as hard as you try, and I know some people can turn it on when the mic goes hot, but if you come into it with this attitude of not being excited, that will project to that podcaster, and ultimately the product you produce together will suffer. You got to bring your A game. Only way to bring your A game is to do this in a fashion that's comfortable for you. And start small and grow. Like we said before, you try to start at the very top. I'm going to jam in 20 interviews this week. You're going to friggin' hate life by Friday.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be in that position. Start low and then work your way up as you get comfortable.
Do you, I'm trying to think this. So let's say you start your podcast and maybe you're doing 1 or 3 shows a week, but you want to take a break for like a week or 2. Mm-hmm. How do you work that out?
Are you saying if it's your own podcast or if
your own podcast? Yes.
If it's your own podcast, for me, it's all about communication.
Yeah.
There's a couple ways around it. I mean, I know when I look ahead, if I know I'm going on vacation or if I have activities coming up, I batch record everything. So I've got content into December of 2022 as we speak today. And that's doing 2 episodes a week because I batched and I took July off.
Yeah.
Knowing that I was like, I can take a little break, recharge, and then get back into it in August. And that's exactly what I did. Now, and I was like, I actually am far enough and I could do this again in December. Having those little planned off periods or time off planned periods, it's remarkable what it can do for your psyche. Yeah. And you can come back into it with this fresh energy when you start back up. And I can say confidently, coming into August, I feel like the interviews I've had so far in August have been the best I've had. Okay. Or the conversations I've had. And I'm not attributing that all to the break I took, but it didn't hurt. It didn't hurt to recharge the batteries. Yeah. But it's all about how you communicate and how you prepare. So if I know I'm going to be taking some time off or I want to take a break, I could do that without even letting my audience know because I can just have my content prepared by batching it out having it edited, having the final product scheduled and ready to release. And I can do that for a few weeks, and then I can take my break.
One of the things that kind of, which is great, what you're saying is really good, but I guess you can kind of change around, because I was thinking, let's say you have everything scheduled, and then on the day that you schedule that the podcast to go live, to be distributed or to go live, whatever, there's a major event in the world that it need to be addressed. Do you end up just kind of canceling that distribution and come kind of do it live? Or how would you handle that? Because you don't want to be like, hey, we're talking about going on vacation, how you have fun, and then there's a major event going on, like where
Yeah.
it's like devastated the world, kind of, where someone should say something.
I see what you're saying, Edward. I mean, I really think, I mean, if you wanted to treat it with kid gloves, you could, but you also have to think beyond. It's not just about the first day.
Yeah.
More than likely, as a podcaster, you're creating evergreen content that's going to resonate with people a month, a year, 5 years down
No,
the
no.
road when they
So, no,
find
no,
it.
I'm talking about, like, imagine, so like, let's say like 9/11, right?
Hmm.
And you have something already recorded and you're talking about branding or whatever. Do you really want to produce that? Do you really want to release that talking about branding, or are you going to do a
No,
podcast kind of,
well, I mean, if you want to talk about extreme scenarios, I think you can use your best discretion. I mean, if something like that were to happen and you feel that it makes no sense to put your content out that day, then pull it back. I mean, end of the day, we're
yeah.
talking about one podcast
Yeah,
release
no, right? Yeah.
up against 9/11. Okay,
Yeah.
I can see what you're saying, but I mean, again, these are extreme scenarios.
Mm.
When you're in
Yes.
the, go ahead.
Yeah, no, 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 no. I completely understand. No, I was about to say, I know we can keep talking for hours, my friend.
Probably
um,
the way this is
yeah,
going.
we just hit. I know we had like an awesome conversation, and hopefully, like, we can do a follow up again. Like, there's so much
Oh,
questions we didn't
certainly.
even get into, even like how to improve someone podcast, and there are so many questions I have.
Hmm.
Let's do a follow up, but
Okay, I'm in.
for someone who maybe joined it at the almost at the end, or maybe just to summarize for them, let's do a quick summarize. Who's Jason Cercone, and what is brand architect?
I am your personal brand architect, and I am going to help you take your personal brand to new levels using podcasts as a catalyst. My goal is to help you experience the type of personal brand growth that I felt using the podcast platform. And like I said before, the ability to have dynamic, engrossing, compelling conversations about the subjects that you're most passionate about. I don't think there's another avenue you can take for building your personal brand that allows you to do so with that would give you a more fun along the way.
Yeah.
And if you find it, tell me, because I would be more than willing to try it, because I can say with 100% confidence the conversations that I've got to have today with you, Edward, and with everybody else that I've spoken to, whether it be through a live video, through a podcast, and then what's led from those where I've talked to people in one-on-one situations, that to me is the most rewarding element of what I do, because I know I get that opportunity to impact somebody and deliver transformation they seek. That transformation is, I want my personal brand to bring more business, to produce more from my book sales, to get more courses out there, whatever it may be. Your personal brand is at the heart of it, because people do business with people. They need to trust you, they need to know you, and they need to like you. And the podcast platform gives you an opportunity to make that happen. So I love the ability to build a blueprint, to design new ways to take your brand to new levels, and to help you establish authority in your space. That's what personal brand architecture is all about for me.
Yeah.
And anybody that wants to have a conversation to learn more, I encourage them to visit my website. It's been at the bottom the whole time, jasoncercone.com. Check out the
Maybe,
work
maybe,
with me page, and
maybe
we'll go from there.
do a spelling just in case someone is listening to the voice. So it's like Jason Cercone,
Yep.
which is like,
Jason spelled Jason. Cercone is CERCONE.com.
Perfect. And the same thing to kind of find you on social media, just Jason Cercone.
Yep. Yep. I'm Jason Cercone on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram.
Thank you so much for listening to the Headliners. I'm your host, Edward Mbeche, and my guest again today was Jason Cercone. Jason, thank you so much, and I really appreciate for taking the time to kind of just add value to the community. Thank you.
Happy to do it, Edward, and I really appreciate the opportunity to get a chance to talk with you today. It's been a blast.
Just give me a second.